Welcome to CEC lecture. The topic for the lecture is Political Communication, Evolution and Transformation. In this lecture, we shall understand the meaning of communication. Then we shall also discuss on historical aspects with reference to evolution of communication. Further, as we take the discussion forward, we will be also looking at the analysis of digitalization of communication. How does digitalization of communication, with the specific focus on the contemporary times, how does this have a bearing on the role of communication? To start with, let us ask ourselves, what do we mean by communications? Communications, as it is popularly defined, it is an exchange of ideas, facts, opinions or emotions of two or more persons. Now, this very important definition tells us that communication involves various things. Communications could be about ideas, it could be about facts, it could express opinions or emotions. Further, again it is popularly held that communications is the process by which two or more people exchange ideas, facts, feelings or impressions. Moving forward, communications can be of different types. Communications can be intellectual, person, spoken or written in nature. Further, when we talk about communications, transferring thoughts, information, emotions and ideas through gestures, voices, symbols, signs and expressions from one person to another. As we discuss the nature of communications, a very popular definition by Newman and Summer points out that communication is an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions or emotions by two or more persons. As we are talking about communications, let us understand that communication process has certain elements: sender, message, encoding, media, decoding, receiver, feedback and noise. Now, as we talk about elements of communication process, namely sender, message, encoding, media, decoding, receiver, feedback and noise, these elements becomes important to understand because communications has witnessed evolution. When we look at from the ancient to medieval to modern phases of history, in each phase of history, communications has witnessed changes. So, therefore, the elements of the communication process too, sender, message, encoding, media, decoding, receiver, feedback, noise, all of this too becomes important to be understood in the context of evolution and transformation. Now, let us go towards the historical lanes. When we look at the historical aspects, communications has witnessed important evolutionary growth. Earlier, when we look at various works of history, there have been remarks that state that information and ideas were transmitted orally. For example, writing, signs and signals, when we talk about it, earlier there have been mentions of clay tablets, the papyrus sheets, all of this. So, this tells us that how communications has kept pace with the evolutions of human civilization. Earlier communication was through signs and signals, but later important developments took place and there are remarks in history that tells us that clay tablets were made use of to express ideas. Papyrus sheets were made use of to store information. Earlier, as once again we look at various remarks from historians, oral traditions were the backbone of knowledge transfer. However, when we look at oral traditions, the very idea that every oral tradition when we look at from the bylanes of history, has interpretation issues or lack of written records. So, in this aspect too, as human beings progress, as human civilization progress from ancient to medieval to modern times, communications also witness changes. So, like earlier, oral traditions were the backbone of knowledge transfer, but later the things also changed. For example, the invention of the printing press, it revolutionized written communication. The printing press, when we talk about it, it paved way for faster multiplication of written texts and their transcription to the general public in the form of newspapers and books. For then later, when we also look at the invention of the electrical telegraph by Samuel Morse, the discovery of the telegraph and of the telephone allowed interpersonal communication over long distances. Radio and communications completed the range of means of communication. So, again we get to see that how from the invention of the printing press to electrical telegraph, all of this with time revolutionized the format, the means of communication. And these discoveries and inventions were brought in by human beings in order to answer to the crisis, the problems of their times. Further, when we look at the evolution of communication, when we map down the transformations, it again in the bigger context of evolution of human civilization, how with time, for example, England's Royal Mail, which was officially established by King Charles I in 1635. Earlier, though it was for specific use only, but later it was also there for public use. So, in 1775, the US postal system was established by the Second Continental Congress with Benjamin Franklin as its first postmaster general. There are again remarks from history that how the first telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. So, all these changes, when we talk about invention of the printing press, when we talk about invention of the electrical telegraph, when we look at the England's Royal Mail, or when we look at the first telephone invention, all of this tells us that how communications through the means of technology witness upgradation. It played an important role in human beings' evolution also because it had a bearing on the politics, society, economy amongst others. This also brings to us the important question, what do we understand by technology? Because in this journey of evolution and transformation of communications, technology has been an important cause. Technology, to say, has been an important cause of change. So, what do we mean by technology? To look at basic dictionary definitions, for example, dictionary.com says that technology is scientific knowledge and or equipment that is needed for a particular industry. Further, the Merriam-Webster dictionary, when we look at the definition for a basic understanding of technology, opines that technology is practical application of a scientific knowledge, especially in a particular area. So, technology being an important cause of evolution of communication, technology which is about scientific knowledge and equipment that is needed for a particular industry, or to say it is about practical application of a scientific knowledge, especially in a particular area. So, technology and communications played an important role, and these advancements, when we look at in the context of industrial revolution, tells us that how changes in communication formats, how ease of travel of information paved way for new beginnings in human civilization. For example, when we try to decode technology and communications in the framework of industrial revolution, we all know that there are a lot of historians, sociologists, political scientists whose work tells us that advancements in communications played a crucial role in ushering the Industrial Revolution by facilitating exchange of ideas and information. It also, because of this important exchange, important ease of exchange in ideas and information, it enabled businesses to operate more efficiently. Further, as we try to understand technology and look at the picture of evolution of communication, it's also very important to look at industrial revolution. What do we mean by industrial revolution? It is the process of change from an agrarian and handicraft economy to one dominated by industry. When we look at this very simple definition by Britannica.com. Industrial revolution, dear learners, has had various stages too. For example, from family system to handicraft system, that was the guild system, to domestic system, that's the cottage system, and finally to the factory system. So, in this transition also, in various stages of industrial revolution, family system to handicraft system to cottage system to factory system, communications also witness evolution. Further, technology also witness changes. We all know that power is currency, a very important currency in any polity, society and economy. So, similarly in industrial revolutions too, the changes in technology impacted not only the industry but society and polity at large, and communication means were important in this regard. For example, the first industrial revolution, the water and steam power were used to mechanize production. As time moved by, with the second industrial revolution, electric power was used for mass consumption. As time moved on, the third phase of industrial revolution witnessed the very important rise of electronics, the internet, the cyber wave amongst others. In the contemporary times, quite often when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, the emphasis on artificial intelligence, IoT, cyber physical systems tells us that this journey from first, second, third to fourth industrial revolution, from water and steam power to electric power for mass production to electronics and cyber issues to fourth industrial revolution led by AI, cyber physical systems, tells us that technology has witnessed huge changes. Technology comes and goes, but however, with that the formats and means of communication too witness changes. For example, when we talk about invention of television, the mechanical TV to black and white TV to color TV, all of this has become very important to be factored in knowing that how changes in technology with not only ushered in important revolution in the industry, but at the same time there was a parallel process also of evolution and transformation of communication. For example, the role of John Lloyd Bayard in Britain or the role of Charles Francis Jenkins in the United States when we talk about invention of television tells us that how the changes in the industrial revolution took keeping in mind the important changes in communications too. Or for example, the important role of Marconi, the Italian inventor that proved that communicating through radio waves was also possible. So, all these examples of Guglielmo Marconi, the Italian inventor who proved that communicating through radio waves was possible, tells us that how changes in communications went hand in hand, parallelly, in tandem with the changes in technology, with the changes that industrial revolution, the age of enlightenment amongst others brought in. So, evolution and transformation of communications, as we are discussing, it never took place in isolation. Evolution and transformation of communication needs to be understood in the bigger context of changes with respect to industrial revolution, advancements in technology, age of enlightenment, age of discovery, and or when we talk about the present age, that is the digital age, the information age. And all this discussion when we look at evolution and transformation of communications also tells us that how important communication is for human civilization. Communication is vital for human existence, and therefore when we look at the typologies also, verbal to non-verbal, when we also look at the means from signs, symbols to written, documented to the digital, all of this tells us that evolution and transformation of communication has always factored in the need for steady approach to let progress of human civilization take place. Further, dear learners, as we talk about evolution and transformation of communications, let us now have a very important discussion with respect to the changes in the contemporary times. Now, we often hear about classical media, that is written press, radio, television. Now, when we talk about classical media with reference to communication and look at it in the framework of evolution and transformation of communication, the classical media, namely the written press, radio and television, TV, earlier they only allowed for one-way communication. However, today when we talk about classical media from radio, TV, press amongst others, all of them have witnessed changes. In the current times, one witnesses the rise of new media. We witness that how computers have witnessed changes towards laptops. It's the age of smartphones, an app for every need, and this is why the digital age is often called as the information age. So, with this becomes a very important question, what do we mean by digitization? Before we take in the meaning of digitization, let us understand what is digitizing. Digitizing consists of transforming analog data into a digital format. So, with this understanding of digitizing, that is transforming the analog data into a digital format, let us now decode what do we mean by digitalization of communication. As we just underlined that how technology has led to rampant changes, communications and various forms and means of communications too have witnessed changes. When we talk about the classical media from press, radio, TV, in the current times, when we talk about the rise of new media, digitalization of communication, it is an important process and phenomenon therein. It is about use of digital technologies to exchange information. Further, when we try to decode digitalization of communication, there is the use of wide range of tools. In digitalization of communication, analogous data in digital format are introduced into databases and metadata. Further, when we look at digitalization of communication, digital communications too demands attention. Digital communication, it is the procedure, the process of exchanging information, messages and ideas via digital technologies and platform. Data communicated or data transmission, in this aspect, digital technologies and platforms play an important role. Digital communication is also about transfer of data or information using digital signals over point to point. Digital communication, therefore, it is a process of sharing ideas, information or messages through electronic devices and online platforms. Today, as we look at digitizing, that is transforming analog data into a digital format, digitalization of communication, use of digital technologies to exchange information with wide range of tools, digital communications, that is process of sharing information, ideas or messages through electronic devices and online platforms, all of this have ushered in the era of digital transformation. To quote an important line from McKinsey.com, digital transformation, it's rewriting of an organization with the goal of creating value by continuously deploying tech at scale. Digital transformation, dear learners, when an organization takes advantage of new technologies to redesign and redefine relationships. This digital transformation has to be understood specifically in the context of communications. Communication is very important to factor in healthy human relations. And today, when relationships are being redefined and redesigned in the context of technology, communications too is witnessing huge changes. When today organizations are deploying technology at large to cater to the meeting the goals, rewriting in this paraphernalia of rewriting, digital transformation, communications too is playing a very important role. So, the old traditional media, namely as we discuss, newspapers, radio, TV. The new media with transition includes digital platforms. So, the traditional and new media, definitely both are important. Both have their own significance, but traditional and new media both impact communication. The traditional media is often criticized when we look at the advent of, especially in the context of advent of digital platforms. The traditional media is criticized that it's passive interaction with their target audience, or to say it is like a one-way communication. The new media, it is often remarked with the use of digital platforms, it is interactive. With the rise of 24/7 Connect, the new media paves way for participation. Further, with the rise of information age and the digital age, with the rise of 24/7 connectivity, the new media, it's fast and constantly updated. The new media further then also paves way for decentralization. Today, knowledge has been decentralized with the rise of new media, wherein the paraphernalia of so many apps, smartphones, AI, machine learning, all of this needs to be factored in. So, therefore, as we look at the journey of evolution and transformation of communication, this journey presents a picture of challenge as well as opportunity. One of the important challenge as well as opportunity is the unprecedented evolution of information technology. Today, the need of the hour is to keep pondering over, keep thinking over how to keep pace with change. It is important to keep thinking over how to keep pace with innovation. So, with this unprecedented evolution of information technology, evolution and transformation of communication has presented new horizons, new dynamics for human beings at large, for public policies, for the operation of politics, for the working of markets, amongst others. The advent and rise of the internet and digital technologies impact on how we create, consume and share information. The experiences and the participatory content today go far beyond the traditional. When we look at evolution, and transformation of communication. There is a redefinition of how we communicate, how we learn, how we understand, how we engage, manner in which we entertain. And all of this tells us that it is important to look at the various dynamisms which are involved in the evolution and transformation of communication. Further, with the rise of personalized, on-demand, interactive content, communications too needs to be factored in. And in this aspect of creating, sharing, engaging, entertaining with content in real time. All of this has a huge impact on public policy. It has a huge bearing on decision making. It impacts the state as well as non-state actors. It impacts the information available for the working and operation of market at large. Today, with the rise of virtual and augmented reality, which enable immersive storytelling. So, in all this, we have to see that how communications with its evolution and transformation has indeed come a long way. Today, we see that with the rise of digital transformations, that communications has witnessed a leap too from old tradition media to the new media, including digital platforms. Both traditional and new media are very important when we look at the dynamics of communication. However, today with the rise of new media, the focus on interactive, participative, fast, constantly upgraded communication, it definitely has a bearing on how we create, consume, share information, ideas, opinions. So, there is a redefinition of the very many boundaries of human beings, and therein it is important to look at these dynamics with a bigger picture of how it is impacting public policy, decision making, impacting the state, as well as presenting new dynamics for various realms of communications. Dear learners, we hope that the lecture today presented to you important insights. We look forward to positive, encouraging feedback from you all. Thank you very much.